So BuzzFeed's come out with yet another movie. If you're not aware, for a while now BuzzFeed has been phasing out making YouTube content, taking more of a focus on other projects such as making full-length feature films. They've done everything from horror to rom-coms, but this time they've decided to take a stab at blending the two. Kind of. We'll get into it. Previously, over a year ago now, I watched every single BuzzFeed film in a row, and I documented my takes on it for a video, and in my opinion, the quality of films kind of ranges. There's some movies that I thought were pretty good, like Fall. That's a movie where people are high up and don't want to fall down. But there's a lot that I really didn't like Dear David or The Book of Love or One True Loves or One Up, and more. Overall, I had a really bad experience, and I made that very clear in the video. So you can imagine my horror when BuzzFeed reached out to me, and they asked me to check out their studio's new film, F, Marry, Kill. Either they're crazy, or they have some confidence in their new movie. And just so we're on the same page, they definitely watched my video, they made that very clear to me. And also, this is not sponsored, so, expect me to be brutally honest. Naturally, I just kind of thought, what the heck? Of course I'm gonna watch this. I've watched every film so far. I'm not gonna bloody stop now. I'm gonna watch every film they make until I die. So not only am I gonna review this movie, by the end of the video, I'm gonna determine whether or not I want to F, marry, or kill it. I already regret that sentence. But before we talk about the film, let's talk a little bit about BuzzFeed Studios itself. They've released 11 films, I guess 12 now, but the vast majority of them were released between 2022 and 2023. For those 2 years, they had a pretty wild output. While these are smaller budget films, they do get kind of a surprising cast for them. A lot of recognizable celebrities like Grant Gustin, Simu Liu, Robbie Amell, Ruby Rose, and Justin Long. They've also made documentaries, television specials, a Hot Ones game show, bunch of stuff. But what seems to be BuzzFeed's bread and butter are romantic comedies. 5 or 6 out of the 11 films I watched for my original video were rom-coms. Now, it's been a bit over a year since their last release, Xmas in late 2023, so it seems with this latest film they've given it a little more time to cook. Maybe what we're gonna see here for BuzzFeed's future is a quality over quantity kind of thing. True crime junkie Ava, played by Lucy Hale, has just turned 30 and she's not happy with where she's at in life. Recently single, she tries to navigate the modern dating world. Unfortunately, this coincides with the swipe right killer's murder spree, and she has to determine if one of her 3 dates is trying to kill her. This is the kind of movie where you can definitely tell that the title came before the premise, not the other way around. A lot of the actors in this are returning from previous BuzzFeed films, like Lucy Hale, who was in Puppy Love, and Virginia Gardner, who was in Fall. For this first part of the review, we're not going to be talking about any major spoilers. Because this is a bit of a murder mystery, I want to be extra cautious in not spoiling things for people who may want to watch this. I'll have a timestamp for when we start getting into the spoilers. Now, to get this out of the way, out the gate here, I do want to say that I think this is one of my favorite BuzzFeed films. For me, I think it's Fall at number 1 and then F, Marry, Kill at number 2. For some people, hearing that it's the second most enjoyable BuzzFeed film, that might not sound like the most glowing review in the world. Fair. I definitely don't think that everyone's gonna like this. I kinda liked it. I'm a bit of a sucker for a murder mystery. I set my expectations really low going into this. If you're looking for something a little more mindless, something to watch with friends, maybe with a couple of drinks, this could be alright. It's a very easy watch. Before I watched this, I kinda thought it was gonna be a bit of a Scream type movie with some romantic comedy elements. It's definitely not this. It's definitely more of a comedy, kind of teetering on that romantic comedy border, with this overarching murder mystery element that is kind of like a narrative framework. If you're looking for something scary or bloody or tense or thrilling, this is not that guy. You should not go into the film with this mentality or you're gonna be really disappointed. From the posters of this movie, which I think look phenomenal, you would definitely get this kind of Scream vibe, and I honestly think it's a bit of a shame it didn't go down this route. I think it would have made a really fun take on the genre, and I think there's a lot of actors in this film that would thrive in that kind of film. So while it's not a horror or a thriller, how does it stack up as a comedy? It's alright, at times. I'm not killing myself laughing at every scene, but it does have legitimately funny moments. I was kind of surprised how good some of the jokes were. Are there jokes in this that are more cringe than funny? Yeah, absolutely, big time, no doubt. But the film most of the time has enough self-awareness to kind of lean in to the cringe. Speaking of cringe though, there's a lot of BuzzFeed-isms in this movie. If nobody told me this was a BuzzFeed film, I think I definitely would have figured it out. Like, like a lot of their other films, they're trying to capture a modern piece of internet culture. In the past, they've tackled everything from influencers to esports, social media, cyberbullying, ghost children downloading Grindr on your phone. They're no stranger to making films about online dating, but this time they've added the element of true crime podcasts. Still very trendy, we swear. Side note, while writing this, I checked out the BuzzFeed Unsolved channel, and they just kind of run reruns of their old content. Feels like there's opportunity for something more here, I don't know. Another thing BuzzFeed Studios loves to do is have text message bubbles pop up on the screen. They do this in so many of their movies. I hate it, but I get it. Phones are just a part of the modern experience, you know, there's no escaping it. It's essential to how we communicate, but gosh, it just looks so terrible though. I'm just saying, you know, nobody show this film to Robert Eggers. His heart won't be able to take it. A lot in this film, mostly early on when they introduce the bulk of the characters, we get a little freeze frame and it tells us about them. I hated this so much. They tell us everything we need to know about the characters from the dialogue. We don't need these little things popping up. It just feels unnecessary. It takes me right out of the moment. It changes the pacing in the scene. I don't want to be spoon-fed information when I'm locked into a murder mystery. We should be developing our own feelings on the characters. BuzzFeed should be the kings of second monitor content. But at moments like this, they prevent that from being the case. The characters overall were something. I found the main character Ava to be likable, but a lot of the plot revolves around her making these baffling life decisions, which I think for a lot of people is going to end up making for a very frustrating watch. I think most of the reason this character is likable is solely because of Lucy Hale. The wrong actor in this role would have made for an unwatchable movie. So I think she absolutely kills it. I think she saves a lot of the dialogue from being too cringe, but just overall really enjoyable on the screen. And I think this could be said for a lot of the actors. I think they're doing pretty bloody good with what they got. That being said, just due to the sheer amount of side characters in this, I don't think a lot of them were balanced very well. Early on, we're introduced to a main friend group, Anthony, Kelly, and Robin. One of these people, and I won't say who yet, is barely in the film at all for no discernible reason. Three most notable characters in the film are probably the three dates. I think all three guys do really well. One of them, Kyle, is kind of doing this understated Jim Carrey kind of deal, and honestly, he's kind of nailing it. Fun fact, this actor was also in a film called Marry F. Kill, and he was also in Woman of the Hour, where he plays one of three bachelors, one of whom is a murderer. So much crossover for this guy in the last couple years. I thought I was really clever for noticing this, but also it turns out it's marked as trivia on the IMDb page, so you know, turns out I'm not that clever. Something this film is clearly trying to address is how scary online dating can be as a woman, that you don't really know who you're meeting up with, but in my opinion, it kind of doesn't really do that in a meaningful way. It kind of focuses a little too much on having that lighter tone, so a lot of characters kind of come off as indifferent a lot of the time to the situation, and that is a big issue in the film, balancing the comedy with the themes. To make all three dudes seem suspicious, they all do questionable things, and of course when they do a questionable thing, it makes them seem unlikable, and then when they're unlikable, they're no longer funny. For the rest of the review, we're going to be doing some spoilers. It's really hard to talk about the murder mystery aspect without touching on spoilers, but again, overall, I think this makes for a fun viewing. Definitely more good than bad here, at least for me, as long as you know, set your expectations. Okay, spoilers ahead, alright, I warned you. What I think is a good thing in a murder mystery film is when you can re-watch it and you notice all the little things that you missed the first time. Entire moments are reframed. This one is not so good at that. And sometimes when it tries to do that, it kind of just blatantly gives away who the killer is instead. I think most people will work out who the killer is at least by the halfway point of the movie. If you're paying attention, it serves it up on a platter at the 52-minute mark, but I would argue you can work it out much quicker than that. In the introduction of this film, we see a montage of a woman going on a date with a guy who takes off his ring. We see his shoes, we see he takes her home, and then he heads off. Then someone comes in and bloody murders her. This is kind of the only murder that takes place on screen, which is why I was saying that it's really not a Scream-type slasher film. And I was honestly really surprised by this, considering the sheer amount of characters in this film, most of which don't have anything meaningful to do. Of course, we're introduced to our true crime lover, Ava. We've also got Anthony, who is a long-term boyfriend, but also wants more boyfriends. Robin, who is very single, but also likes ethical polyamory. Don't worry about these facts because Anthony's boyfriend or Robin's polyamory are never mentioned again. We've also got Kelly, who's super married and loves watching her own wedding video, because every group of 4 friends needs a wife guy. BuzzFeed taught me that. They're all celebrating Ava's 30th, but she's depressed because she's in a weird place in life. She's still not sure what she wants to do career-wise, and she's recently gotten out of an 8-year relationship with a guy who was described as being an insecure narcissist with a mustache. Hey, what are you looking at me for, huh? Robin suggests that she gets back into the dating scene, get back onto the apps. But Anthony brings up the fact that the swipe right killer is not only active, but specifically targeting people exactly like her in their area. But for some reason, nobody really cares about this. And I don't know, for me, this is kind of like the first moment where I was like, you know, damn, what the hell are these people doing? You would assume these people be a little scared or empathetic, but they're just so indifferent to it. Maybe they're making a hot take on the whole true crime audience there. More likely, they're just trying to keep the film light. For context, pretty much everyone is into this podcast called Mark My Murder, and it's through this podcast everyone gets information about the swipe right killer. Ava listens to it throughout the movie, and they slowly release more and more details. One example of this is that they reveal that the killer likes to drink rosé. Maybe that's gonna come back later. Ava goes home and considers crawling back to her ex, but she gets jumped by a home invader. But don't worry, it's just her friend Valerie, or sister, or something. She's always like that, she's always getting up to things. I think this is Ava's sister, unless I misinterpreted something. You would think out of all the details to have pop up on the screen, that would be one of them. Anyway, Valerie is eccentric, because she is big into crime deterrence. For example, for Ava's birthday, she's given her an appointment for a top-of-the-line security system installation. They're always trying to make out that Valerie is a kooky, crazy, eccentric woman. But in all honesty, she's probably the most irrational person in this. She's the only one seriously concerned about the swipe right killer. Kind of frustrating how dismissive everyone is of her. Valerie also drops the bombshell that Ava's ex has just gotten engaged to another cop. So Ava spirals and she calls up Robin and they make her a dating profile. Can't stress this enough, terrible idea. She gets lots of matches, but most of them are terrible. But she recognizes one guy, Kyle from middle school. He wears a beanie and gives a kangaroo fact. I would take this as a personal attack, except for the fact that he gets the kangaroo fact wrong.
Did you know there are 13 million kangaroos in Australia?
There's not 13 million kangaroos. That's stupid. What a stupid, there's more than 40 million kangaroos. She also matches with this guy, Mitch. They meet up and it turns out he just bought the bar that they're meeting at. Now this is a man. Honestly, I'm sold. You know, just date this guy. There is just one little thing about him, though. He has no fingerprints because of kitchen accidents. Genuine question here. If someone is missing their fingerprints, is that a red flag? It's probably not. Right? She ends up catching Valerie stalking her on a date because naturally she's worried about her sister being murdered, but Ava's so miffed about this that out of spite she immediately takes Mitch home. And let me tell you, they do not marry or kill. After not participating in marrying or killing each other, she kicks him out and reconnects with Kyle on the phone. Then Norman arrives to do a security walkthrough to prepare for the installation of the security system. They hang out a bit and they've got a little bit of a connection, so he asks her out. He also mentions that he does night classes in forensics. He wants to be a medical examiner. He's got a little bit of a morbid curiosity. Here's another question. Is it a red flag to do night classes? And what part of a security walkthrough involves investigating someone's bra? Ava goes to her job at Kelly's photography studio. Kelly wants pictures taken of her in her wedding dress for her husband, Brad. Here she talks about the date with Mitch. Kelly's not super happy that she slept with Mitch, and she insists that for the upcoming date with Kyle, she must not sleep with him until the third date. Challenge accepted. She goes on a date with Kyle, and he is a weird dude. This is the actor that I talked about earlier in the video. Again, I think he's really talented. He does this kind of cringe funny really well. One of the more interesting characters in it. My issue with this whole scene is that this guy comes across so poorly that any reasonable person would never want to see him again. In any other movie, this would be an awkward date scene where the character never wants to see this person ever again, and she goes back to her friends and tells them all how terrible it was. But in this, she doesn't do that. She sees this guy multiple more times. He also drinks rosé, and as we remember, that is suspicious. Is drinking rosé on a date a red flag? I hope not, because I bloody love rosé. He ends up asking Ava if she wants to go back to his, and Kelly's voice rings in her head, reminding her to wait 3 dates. But there's also no reason for her to want to go back to this guy's house. He hasn't done anything that makes him come across as even a reasonable person. We didn't need this bit of Kelly telling her to wait 3 times. This guy's the worst vibes, never seen see him again. Towards the end of the date, he's even a little bit pushy in trying to get her to come over. There's a killer on the loose. Stay away from this guy. So instead of going back to Kyle's, she hangs out with Mitch, again to participate in not marrying or killing. While she's with him, Valerie calls up and says that the killer has unidentifiable fingerprints, but she just hangs out with Mitch anyway. Her friends now identified that she is in an F, marry, kill, and they kind of debate for a while which is the right answer here. In my opinion, the answer is kind of obvious. You kill Kyle, you marry Mitch, and you F Norman. Nobody brings this up, but Mitch seems like a really nice guy, and also, he's a business owner. Kyle sucks and she barely knows Norman. Why is this a debate? Another murder happens off screen and a bloody footprint is found. Shoe size 10. And this sets up a whole thing where she wants to prove to all her friends that none of the guys she's dating is the swipe right killer, so she's gonna keep dating these fellas, but take note of their shoe sizes. I'll just jump ahead and we'll get this out of the way now. They're all size 10. She meets up with Mitch for activities, but he says that he wants to cook for her and get to know her a little better. And she opens up to him, gives a bit of life story, and also reveals that she's dating a couple of other people. Mitch doesn't react super well to this, but then he says that it's fine, and then they quickly do some activities. This is where she sees the shoe size and starts to freak out. He finishes up cooking and walks in holding a knife, but she now tries to leave because she's too worried about the shoe size thing. Then he reveals that he's not super comfortable with just being used for his body, and she leaves without eating the fresh cooked meal. Look, the optics here are not great for Mitch, I'm not gonna lie, but if the fingerprints thing wasn't a red flag, I don't understand why the shoe size would be. Obviously, him confronting her holding a knife, not good though. But the whole motivation behind this conversation makes sense. He was cooking her a meal so he could get to know her better, and then she uses him for his body and leaves. She now thinks Mitch is dangerous, but thankfully she's now got a date with a much more rational adult, Kyle the vet. They do a picnic and I hate it, but she kind of finds him weirdly charming. He then ends up getting in a fight with a guy playing a guitar. Honestly, incredible throw. She looks at his shoes and then leaves very quickly, so we don't really need to dwell on it. But it kind of begs the question, why the hell is she even doing this? Obviously, if she doesn't feel safe, she should absolutely leave the dates. Maybe just don't date any of these people. She finally goes on a date with Norman to her friend's comedy show, where he's called up on stage to participate in the improv. This leads to one of the most uncomfortable scenes I've ever witnessed. He's told for their improv scenario, he's got to act out a first date. Very topical.
I'm Norman.
Hi.
It's so nice to kill you!
Pretending to be an active murderer in a comedy show is one thing, but one that is active in your area is on another level. There's a very high chance that people in this crowd have been affected. And also just grabbing someone that you don't know? Insane. I would absolutely call the date right there. But she doesn't seem to be too fussed by it. He rushes off halfway through the date because his sister needs help with something, and Ava is suspicious. It's around this time Brad walks in. He doesn't get a character introductory freeze frame, but this is Kelly's husband, and he reveals that they're on a break. Kelly has been talking this whole film like her marriage is great, so this is quite the twist. Also, take note of the shoes. Where have we seen these shoes before? Have we seen these shoes before? Rather than dwell on her best friend's pending divorce, Ava and Robin decide to follow Norman to a house where it looks like he's disposing a body. So they wait until he leaves and they break into the house where it's revealed that he actually does have a sister and she's in a wheelchair. Thankfully, Robin uses her expert improv skills to defuse and remove themselves from the situation. Norman feels bad about leaving suddenly, so he calls up and asks if she wants to continue the date back at his. They enter the bedroom, I guess no waiting for 3 dates here, where she finds a high heel. She asks who it belongs to, and he says it must belong to his sister. And she's like, yeah, right, your sister in a wheelchair wears heels. So first of all, extremely ignorant and factually incorrect thing for her to say. And second of all, he never told her that his sister was in a wheelchair. Dun dun dun. He starts to get a weird vibe, and he asks her to leave, and for some reason she starts to get argumentative about it, which is so weird because she, out of anyone, should understand how bad this looks, how suspicious she seems. But she leaves and she marks him as definitely killed. Compare this interaction with the outwardly violent Kyle or the knife-wielding Mitch. Why does she view this guy the worst out of the three of them? She was the issue in this interaction, not him. I don't know, this bit I thought was weird. She meets a woman on the street who is Norman's neighbor. Now, don't get attached to her because the next morning Eva finds out from a podcast that this lady has been murdered. She is now convinced that she's dating the killer. Valerie series sponsored by Bubbly does some research into Norman, and he was also probably the last to see his neighbor alive. So she convinces Eva to go to the police. Surely the police would investigate this guy solely because his neighbor was murdered, but I guess more evidence is good. At the police station, there's a bunch of other women who are all also convinced that they are dating the killer because they all listen to this podcast. It's a funny joke, but it's also like, what are they trying to say here? While she's here, she gets a video message from Kyle, who apologizes and also shows that he bought that guy a new guitar. Maybe this Kyle guy's not so bad after all. Maybe I gave him a bad rap. Finally, Jake, Eva's police officer X, comes into the film. Whoever wrote this movie's got such a vendetta against mustaches. As someone who has a mustache, I feel like I have to address this. I get it. It's kind of valid. I don't trust people with mustaches. They make people seem suspicious. I'm only allowed one because I'm Australian. Now, Jake, he's a little bit outspoken. Dare I say, a little bit sexist. But weirdly, he's kind of got the best chemistry with Ava out of anyone else in the film. They have a lot of quick banter, and you get the feeling that there is a real genuine care there. But it says a lot about this that the person who has the most connection and chemistry with the main character is a sexist ex who cheated on her multiple times. He's probably the most likable male character in this, probably partially because he's never positioned as being a suspected murderer. So they maybe should have given Kyle this kind of personality type, charming but outspoken instead of just being weird and creepy. At least then it would make more sense that she wanted to see more of him. Anyway, they talk for a while, and it kind of just says that the podcast is mostly nonsense, and that the main piece of evidence linking the crimes is that the murderer always took a shoe from the victims. They haven't made this aspect of the crimes public knowledge yet. But wait a second, oh my goodness. Norman had a woman's shoe. So she decides she's gonna go back to Norman's and try and collect DNA evidence from him to link him to the other crimes. Mitch reappears for what is ultimately his final scene in the film. He gets emotional and reveals that he has deep feelings for her, but she rejects him and says she'd love to continue sleeping with him, and then she leaves. I'm not really sure why she doesn't like him. They never make that clear. Especially at this point, he might be the best option considering she thinks Norman is the killer and Kyle is Kyle. But sure, leave my guy Mitch. Mr. Business owner who's great in bed and loves to cook for you. Go ahead and marry Kyle. She heads to Norman's to collect the DNA evidence from him. No mention of how sorry she is that his neighbor just passed away. No acknowledgement of how scary that must be for him. She takes the shoe, removing it from the crime scene for some reason. She also pulls out some of his hair and digs her nails into his skin, quickly leaving and delivering it to the police. Jake suggests that she stay somewhere else tonight, considering that Norman installed all of her security. Now, you might think here, perfect, stay with your cop ex. Probably no safer place. But no, she does not want to do that. Thankfully, there's tons of other supporting characters in this that she can rely on. Just kidding, none of them pick up her calls. This was Anthony's time to shine, but he flopped it. Norman comes over to find out why she's being so strange, and she kind of freaks out on it. So she decides to stay with her only remaining friend, Kyle. You think she could just show up at one of her friends' houses here? Clearly not the best choice. Even just stay with your neighbor or something. Even though at this point she doesn't think he's the killer, he's still really weird. So she goes over and they share a bottle of rosé, and he asks if she wants to take a bath, and she says yes. In the home of a guy she's seen twice since middle school. On one of the dates, she left because she felt unsafe, and now she's doing this. And to make matters worse, she doesn't bring her phone into the bathroom. Unfortunately, this times perfectly with people remembering that she exists. Valerie has found out that Kyle is not who he says he is. Who saw that coming? She calls Kelly to inform her that Kyle is not a veterinarian, has multiple assault charges, a living wife, and came to the city 2 days before the murders began. What a twist. He now reveals to Ava that he is terrifying and very bad. And he does the whole typical girls never go for nice guys speech, you know the one. They do a big running around bit, and when things look really dire, she is heroically saved by Kelly, who stabs Kyle. Kelly convinces Ava to pull the knife out of Kyle, which results in him bleeding out, and Kelly says she's going to take care of everything and stage the body to make it look a little bit more like self-defense, which you might note, it already was. It's here that Eva realizes that Kelly has multiple phones, all with dating apps. Wait a second, you don't think that Kelly is the swipe right killer? Do you? Yeah, no, obviously, she is. If BuzzFeed's taught me anything, it's that you can't trust the wife guy. Anyway, this is kind of an issue that the film falls into. When it tells you that the murderer is one of 3 people, you can immediately assume that it's not one of the 3 people. Honestly, it would be more surprising if one of them was the killer. Anthony's barely in the film, Robin doesn't have a lot going on, the ex-boyfriend comes into the film way too late, the only real options are Kelly and Valerie. When you watch the intro of the film, you can really clearly see a guy take his wedding ring off, and then when Brad shows up in the film and says that he and Kelly are on a break, they're kind of just serving it to you on a platter. And when Kelly first appears on the screen, we get text on the screen telling us how extremely married she is. They couldn't make it more obvious. All this definitely removes a lot of the momentum, and for me, a lot of the fun. Eva walks in on Kelly planting evidence to make Kyle look more like the swipe right killer, and then she reveals her motivations. While they were on a break, she watched Brad go on a date with another woman, so she put on a pair of his shoes and killed the lady. You would think that this murder would immediately link her to the crimes, but you know, whatever, I guess. Considering this movie pitches itself to a true crime audience, you think that they could put in more truthful crime. She was planning on planting the evidence on Brad to get him arrested for the murder, but decided she wants to take this further and catfish women who date married men and do them in. She then just started doing people in who wear stilettos. When Brad wanted to get back together, she regretted everything. Thankfully, Kyle fell into her lap. Ava's decided that she's not going to let this slide, so they tussle. She also exclaims that Kelly looked awful in a wedding dress, which is objectively not true, and then stabs her with a shoe when the police come. Ta-da. She's a hero. She's caught the swipe right killer. But at what cost? Throughout the ending of this film, she kind of talks about Kelly like she never liked her, which is such a weird choice. The whole film, they've made it seem like Kelly is her best friend. And I get that if your mate murders a bunch of people, that puts a strain on the friendship, but maybe she could show that she was a little bit hurt by all this. She ends up getting a moment with her ex where he gives her his blessing to date Norman. What? Why does she need that? I don't know what this is about. Also, choosing Norman after all of this is crazy. Sure, he's not a murderer, but there's no vibes. That's arguably worse. Norman should hate her. She literally broke into his sister's apartment. This whole film kind of bordered on the messaging being women be crazy for a lot of this, with the film even poking fun at that in the police station scene. The killer being Kelly, a woman who was maybe overreacting to seeing her partner date and then taking it out on other women. I think if Kyle didn't end up being crook, this probably would have been a pretty problematic premise. Also, Ava becomes a permanent member of the podcast she likes for some reason. I don't know if that's the best career choice for her. Trauma, I hardly know her. So while I didn't love the ending to this, would I watch it again? Yeah, probably. It was kind of funny. And I think I would enjoy watching it with friends and seeing if they could figure out who the killer is. But yeah, as we talked about, it definitely has issues. But if this is the start of a new trend, and BuzzFeed's just going to be making better and better movies, I do surprisingly look forward to seeing what comes next. So am I gonna marry or kill this movie? Well, I definitely don't want to kill it, and I don't want to marry it. That's a lot of commitment, but we did spend one beautiful night together. So I think I want to be friends with this movie, because that's what the F stands for. Friendship. Hey, thanks for watching. Let me know if you've seen this film and what you thought of it, and thanks for not commenting that I look like a serial killer in these glasses. If you're curious about any other BuzzFeed films, I got you covered. You know, check out my video on that. Alright, bye, thank you. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate you watching.